Hello and welcome to the OTB channel. Well, as it's been pointed out to me by one of the commentators on my last video, I haven't done a great deal of reviews of RPM distros, and I tend not to look at Plasma, preferring instead to look at the likes of Mate and XFCE. Well, let's put that right. Today I'm going to take a look at openSUSE, the Tumbleweed version, and we're going to do a net install of the Plasma desktop. See you after the intro. Okay, welcome back. So openSUSE. I have done one review of the Leap version, the stable version, if you like, of openSUSE quite a long time ago, 7-8 months or more back. And I did install it on my system for a while and lived in it, and I was quite impressed with it. And I've used it all the way back, you know, in the early 2000s, 2004, 5, 6, 7, 8, etc. And for a while I lived in it, and it's a decent distro. Over time, I've had a few issues, and my issues were not the distro itself, but they were due to the fact that I used to have an NVIDIA card in the hardware I was using, and I had a few issues with NVIDIA drivers, but we are going back more than 10 years. And when I installed it less than 12 months ago on my Intel hardware, it was superb. So why haven't I looked at it as much? I think it's really just a case of I'm familiar with Deb-based and Arch-based distros, and you tend to stick to what you know. So I'm glad that the commentator on my last video said, hey, you don't look at these that much. And I thought, no, you're right, actually. I probably should spend more time doing a little bit more of a broad spread. Because the likes of openSUSE sort of fits every criteria that I consider important. I don't like a fork of a fork of a fork. I do like a distro that pretty much is its own thing. And openSUSE certainly falls into that category for me. People think that because it uses RPM packages that it might well have come from Red Hat somewhere in the past. But actually, it had more to do with Slackware initially, but it's become its own thing long since. And it did eventually move over to the RPM package management system. But it has its own unique identity, and it has its own graphical configuration utility called Yast, yet another setup tool, which is very specific to openSUSE. It's been around for a long time. Well, SUSE Linux has been around for a long time. They have quite a solid foot in the corporate world through the enterprise version of SUSE Linux. But openSUSE is a popular distro. It has a forum that's known to be very friendly. It's a polished distribution, and in many ways I'm quite surprised that it seems not to be more popular than it is. Maybe it has a huge user base under the surface that we're just not quite aware of, but the Deb-based distros and the Arch-based distros seem to get all the plaudits at the moment. So rightly or wrongly, I don't know the reasons why. There also doesn't seem to be that many spin-offs of openSUSE. Yes, there are a few, but not that many compared to the Deb-based distros and the Arch-based distros. Possibly because openSUSE doesn't prioritize a particular desktop over another. Your main desktops are KDE and Plasma, but you can install pretty much anything on it, so I suppose you could say there's not as much of a need. But look, let's take a look. I'm going to download the net install simply because I'm going to do Tumbleweed, which is a rolling release. So it makes sense for me, just as if I was doing an Arch install, to download the packages over the web. So I've got the latest versions right from, scratch. let's quickly go over and have a look at the openSUSE website, and then we'll get on with the install. So we're on the combined screen now, and you can see the openSUSE.org webpage in front of you. And we have a couple of choices. We have Leap, which is the regular release version, tends to be, well, more stable perhaps than Tumbleweed, although the packages are going to be older. Then we have Tumbleweed, the newest Linux packages, and it's a rolling release, which is fast, integrated, and stabilized. So it is usable, in other words. And if we click on more information, who is it appropriate for? Well, any user who wishes to have the newest packages, including the kernel, Samba, Git, desktops, etc., etc. So if you require the latest software and integrated development environments, this is probably for you. If you're new to Linux, you're probably better off going with Leap initially until you get more of a feel of the system. But what I'm going to do today is going to be pretty much what you do on either version. So if you click on Install Tumbleweed, you've got a few options here. You can download a DVD image, 4.35 gig, so that's pretty big. Or you can download a network image, which is only 143 megs, which is what I went for. There is also, well, you know, i586 32-bit versions, which is great. And there is a live version there as well. Although it does say with Tumbleweed, they should not be used to install or upgrade Tumbleweed. Use the Tumbleweed media instead. So I'm going to use the network install. So let's get on. Let's fire it up in VirtualBox and we'll go through the process. Right, so I've booted the openSUSE net install ISO, and I've done it to full screen, but you can see we haven't got full screen resolution here. You do have a number of options with the help keys down at the bottom, and you'll see I've used the F2 key to set the language to UK. I've set the video mode to 1920 by 1080. Whether or not it expands as we go on, well, we'll see. I've set the the source to HTTP. I've kept the kernel as default. The driver option, well, it was set as no, and I've just left it as that. And you can see we have the option to either boot from the hard disk, to do an installation, or to do an upgrade. So I haven't got a particularly fast internet connection here. So I'm expecting that this could take a while. I won't put you through all of the downloading. I'll just show you the interactive elements, and I'll probably keep pausing it, and we'll come back when there's something more to show. So let's hit installation and see what happens. The openSUSE installer doesn't look to have changed that much in many years in terms of its overall look and feel. I'm sure under the surface it has, but it feels a little bit different to the Calamaris and Ubiquity installers. And yeah, we've got this moving graphic on the bottom here, and I'm assuming that this is going to do is it's going to take us through the setup. I'm going to stick with defaults for the most part. I've just booted it in standard BIOS mode. I believe openSUSE uses the btrfs file system by default, and if that's what it suggests, that's what I'm going to stick to. Okay, so I paused that for a little while. It seemed to take a minute or so just to sort itself out, and then it's now booted into this main installer screen, and I'm pleased to see that it does seem to be at full resolution. So that's good. As you'll see, it looks completely different to what we tend to be used to as far as an installation screen is concerned. And it's obviously doing its thing, downloading various bits and pieces, as we can see from the bottom of the screen there. And right, it takes us straight to a EULA. I'm obviously not going to read this here. I think it's because we're so used to not having EULAs on Linux distributions that it comes a little bit like a shock when we see one. It's not something that I'm particularly fond of, I've got to say, but I'm just going to hit next and move on from here and see where it takes us. So it's now probing for the hardware. It's obviously found my active internet connection. Do I want to activate online repositories? Yes, please. It'll be quite hard not to do that. And it's adding the main update repository, the main repository, and the main non-OSS repository. I don't think we need sources or debug at this stage. So let's just hit next and carry along. So here we go. We've got a few options now. I do quite like the fact that they don't prioritize one desktop over another. So we have the option here to go for KDE, GNOME, XFCE, or a generic desktop. I'm not going to go for GNOME, people. We've seen a lot of XFCE. Let's just for a change go with the Plasma desktop and see what it does. So this is what it's proposing. It's going to create a GPT partition, even though I'm in BIOS mode. Okay, fine, I'll go with that. And it's going to create a BIOS boot partition because I've booted in BIOS mode. It's going to create a root partition with btrfs, and it's going to create a 2 gig swap partition. Okay, and I believe with btrfs, or btrfs, let's just stick with that, it creates these sub-volumes, which I believe are all mountable in their own right. I've never used btrfs before, so this is sort of new to me. But if you want to use the snapshotting facility that's built into openSUSE, you're going to need to use btrfs. I'm just going to accept the defaults and click next. And we've got a big white screen at the moment. And now a message saying Yast 2 is synchronizing with the server. Okay, well, it's got our time zone correct. So actually the little F2 switch when we hit the boot screen obviously seems to have taken effect all the way along, which is good to see. User's full name. Well, let's go with, excuse me, nothing new. Let's go with OTB. Set my normal password. Confirm it. Use this password for system administrator. Yeah, please. I don't want an automatic login. Interesting to see that that is ticked by default. And we have the option there to skip the creation of a user if we wanted. Let's just hit next. Right, and we get this screen now, which gives us an overview of what it's going to do. So the bootloader is Grub. Okay, it's recognized that we're on an MBR system. Trusted boot disabled. I presume that's the secure boot facility. Install boot code into MBR. We'll just let that do its thing. Do not install boot code into a partition with boot. Right, just leave that for the time being. Then software. So this is what it's going to install. I can actually click on that if I want to make some changes on the hoof, and I could choose a whole range of alternative things. So it's going to install the Plasma desktop here, fonts, the X Windows system, some multimedia. But you can actually run through all of here, and you can see you have quite a few options. I could install another desktop environment as well. Do you know what? Why don't I do that? Why don't I put XFCE on here as well? I think that would be quite interesting to see what it actually does. What if I hit details? What does that bring up? Not a lot at the moment. Oh, right. Okay. So this is all the individual packages that it's actually going to install. And we have the option there that if I wanted to install some additional XFCE plugins, I could do so from here. So quite nice that you've got the option here that although there is a default install, you can tweak this as much as you want. I'm just going to accept that. We'll let it put XFCE on the system as well as KDE. So in addition to your manual selections, the following packages have been changed to resolve dependencies. Okay, well, I'm good with that. So I'm pretty much going to just follow along now. I'm looking at the ticks on the left, and it seems to have sorted itself out. We're at the point where we're doing the installation overview. Let's just hit OK. Okay. Install. Right, I'm expecting this to take a little while. I'm just looking at the time now. I make it 25 past 12, and we'll come back. It's warming up, as you can see. We'll come back when some interaction is required from me. Right, well, I thought I'd just bring you back while this installation is happening and coming to an end. It does give you a countdown up here, and it says I've got 1 minute 34 seconds left. It's taken 40 minutes so far, which actually isn't that bad. Remember, this is a net install. I haven't got a particularly fast internet connection. I've just measured the speed, and I'm getting about 25 meg down at the moment. So unfortunately, I don't live in an area where I can get fibre, so it's the best I can get. And if it only takes 40 minutes to download, it's sort of similar to an Arch install, really, where everything's being installed over the web, and it does ensure that you get the latest packages. So it's no hardship as such, and since I clicked the install button, I've not had to do anything. It's just got on doing what it's doing. So it's no real hardship. In fact, if you know it's going to take 40 minutes, you can go off and make yourself a cup of coffee or whatever and just come back once it's done. So from this stage, I'm going to come away and we'll come back once I've booted the install system. Right, so here we are back. I've booted into the install system. This is my second boot into the system. After the installation, I didn't shut it down, I just let it reboot, and it rebooted fine. But when I logged into the Plasma desktop, there was no wallpaper, no right-click menu, and there was certainly a number of things missing from the settings menu. So I logged out, re-logged in, everything came back. So I rebooted, and again, no wallpaper, no nothing when I first logged in, and then I logged out and logged back in again. So there's obviously a little bit of a bug there, but it's not a showstopper. If you're using bleeding edge software, these little bits and pieces, you obviously have to put up with. So we've got a really clean Plasma desktop here. It's funny, when I, years ago, when it used to be the big wars between KDE and GNOME 2, I wasn't a fan of KDE. I was very much a GNOME 2 fan, and that's why I've stayed with Mate. And KDE always used to seem really heavy to me. But over the last few years, KDE has transformed itself. It's actually, I don't know if I'd go as far as saying lightweight, but it feels, you know, pretty snappy on the whole. I don't know if I've got HTOP in here. Doesn't look like I have. What about a monitor? A system monitor? K-Sysguard? Let's open that and let's see how the system's actually doing on the system load. That's not bad, you know. 560 or 0.56 of a gig for memory. That's not bad at all, to be honest. So I'm quite pleased about that. Now, I'm quite unfamiliar with the Plasma desktop, so I've mentioned a lot that my videos are about me exploring as much as anything else. And with something like Plasma, I'm like a noob because I don't use it. So I'm looking around now just to see what's what. So we've got a clipboard icon there, a volume icon. I've actually disabled the volume. Most recent device. Okay, so it's spotting the net ISO that I had hooked up to it. There's my network, which I presume is, yeah, pretty much network manager. What does that take me to? Software. Oh, so this is status and notifications, software updates, night color control. Very nice. Battery and brightness, and KDE Connect, which I believe is all about connecting to an Android phone. And then you've got your time and date and a show desktop button. What about right click? Okay, so quite a detailed right click menu here. Paste clipboard contents, icons that you've got on the desktop if you want to align them. I'm not sure what KRunner is. Add widgets, add panel, activities, customize the layout. What happens if I do that? It brings up a little widget. Let's click on configure desktop. And here we have, well, not many wallpaper, to be honest, but, you know, I think you can go over the top with wallpaper sometimes. This is big enough in terms of a download, and most people end up using custom wallpaper. I can see I've got 3 XFCE wallpapers there. I've got an openSUSE default wallpaper, and I've got something called Flow. If I apply that, that looks a bit more KDE-like. I quite like that, actually. That looks quite nice. Mouse actions, location, icons. Oh, that's all good. What are activities? Oh, it just tells me which desktop I'm currently using. So let's shut that down. So the right-click menu, that's fine. I can lock the screen or log out, presumably, or reboot or do whatever I'm doing, or configure my desktop. And that just brings up that screen that I had before with wallpaper. So this is just a very quick look. I'm not going to go into the ins and outs of KDE. Let's go into the menu. I do quite like the KDE menu. It's very much the old Windows style. I quite like this. Let's see what we've got here. We had a big install, so we've got a science application there. Interesting. Various board games, Mahjong, K-Reversey, I've no idea. Patience, of course. And logic games, K-Mines and K-Sudoku. Okay. Graphics, what have we got installed? Oh, right, so we've got Digicam for photo management, document scanner tool, the GIMP, GwenView, Hugin batch processor, don't know. We've got LibreOffice Draw, Ocular, which is a document viewer, Ristretto image viewer, Shotwell, another photo manager. I know that openSUSE installs things according to kind of package groups, so some of these will no doubt have been installed along with the XFCE desktop. Show Photo and Scanlight, another scanning application. What about Internet? So an RSS reader, aggregator, we've got Firefox, KDE Connect, Kmail, an IRC client conversion. You can tell the ones that are KDE because they all have a K next to them. Pigeon in Instant Messenger. Do you know, I haven't used that for years. Do people still use it? Okay. The KDE PIM or a PIM data exporter. Ramina as a remote desktop client. Good to see Thunderbird there. That would be my preferred GUI email client. Transmission. Tiger VNC. Okay. It's a great VNC viewer. I just kind of question why it's there as default, to be honest, but fine. You've got the Parole Media Player. Praga as a music player. I've never heard of that. Don't know if it's a KDE thing. Pulse Audio volume control and the good old VLC media player. What about Office? Well, you've got the K-Office suite by the looks of it there, but you've also got LibreOffice, which is great. Settings, well, KDE is, of course, known for having a mass of settings. And the system, what have we got here? We've got Discover, which is the KDE Software Center, I believe. Dolphin as a file manager, console, LightDM greeter settings, the Wacom tablet finder, that's interesting. You've even got Xterm there. And yes, you can all see Yast, and we'll talk about Yast in a second. What about utilities? Yeah, an archiver, bulk rename tool, catfish file search, Ingrampa, the GNOME character map, the Mate calculator. That's interesting. XFCE and KDE, and yet they install the Mate calculator. Okay, whatever. And the Thunar file manager, that's obviously to do with XFCE. So, pretty much fully loaded. I mean, yes, it's quite a big download, but you can immediately, for those people who I just want to install a desktop and get to work, well, you've pretty much got enough to get to work here, whether you want the GIMP, whether you want LibreOffice, whether you want to browse the internet, whether you want to set up your email. It would all seem to be here. I'm not quite sure what version KDE it is. Maybe if we go into the settings, that will tell us. If we look at information, Info Center, there we are. Let's have a look at the Info Center and see if that tells us. So we can see we're on openSUSE Tumbleweed, KDE Plasma version 519.2, and I've given it 8 gig of RAM, so it's showing up as 7.8 there. A couple of threads of my i5 processor. It's the 64-bit version, the 5.77 kernel, so that's pretty pretty much cutting edge. And we can actually dig down here and see exactly what it's using. Energy consumption statistics, file index monitor, devices. It's a wealth of information here, guys. What I would suggest you do, if you're going to install KDE, is go and have a look at it, see what it can do. Now, what is it about openSUSE that makes it different? Well, it's Yast, which stands, if I remember correctly, as yet another setup tool. And this is your GUI, if you like, for just about any sort of sysadmin job that you need to do. How much you'll use this will depend what you're using the distro for, but you can pretty much do whatever you want with it. So we've got software management here, software repositories. Let's just click on software repositories and see what it brings us to. So we have some configured repositories here, our main repository, our main OSS repository, and the main update repository. I wonder if from here I can just add a repository. Let's just click add. And let me click community repositories and see what it says. I'm guessing completely here. Okay, so that's quite nice. I can add the Pacman repository direct from here. I can install it by Zipper, the command line tool as well. And if I had NVIDIA, I could install the NVIDIA graphics repo from here as well. Although I did see a note while I was reading through about Tumbleweed that if you have NVIDIA hardware, you may want to think twice before using Tumbleweed, because the kernel's going to change a huge amount. And as you know, with NVIDIA graphics, that can sometimes cause a few issues. So use additional online repositories. Okay, so I presume it's a simple case of clicking OK. Import the key. Yeah, okay. And we can see that the Pacman repository has now been added. Okay, well, that's good. I believe what we need to do, though, after adding that repository, is to make sure that all of our packages are up to date. And the way we'd do that is we'd issue a sudo zipper dup. DUP, dist upgrade if you like, same as Debian, is recommended for Tumbleweed. Password for root, okay. And I'm presuming this is going to be, it's going to change all the packages round, although it doesn't seem to be doing that. How strange, I'll read about that in a minute. I was under the impression that if you have Pacman installed, then what happens is you'll be prompted to update quite a lot of the standard packages to the Pacman versions. But bear with me, let me just have a look for that. I have just gone on the wiki, the openSUSE wiki, and it says that after adding the Pacman repository, I should run this zipper command. Allow update. Pacman is not found by its alias, number or URI. How strange. Okay, well in that case, let's add Pacman by command line. I'm just looking for the command line here. I'll stick sudo in front of it, and it should be that. Okay. Repository Pacman successfully added. Let's see if there's any updates. Aha! That looks more like it. So let me just run these and then we'll come back. 31 packages to upgrade. Okay, so that's now finished. So let's just go back and have a look in those software repositories and see what it says. I'm pretty sure that I added Pacman before. Let me have a look. We still have the Pacman repository there, so I'm not quite sure what happened there, but nothing seemed to actually take effect. Perhaps it wasn't enabled or something similar, but nevertheless, Pacman is now installed. Maybe I should have ticked enabled, and maybe I didn't. I don't know. I'd have to go back and have a look at the video. But we now have the ability to play codec encumbered videos and music. We may need to install some more multimedia codecs, the G-Streamer library, etc., etc. But with Pacman on board, it allows us to do that. I do understand why there are these legal issues, and Fedora is exactly the same. I just think that for a new user who's perhaps not that familiar with having to do that, it just doesn't make the thing easy. I mean, as you can see, once I'd looked at the wiki and put in a couple of commands, it all works. So we've got a whole range of different things here. We've got an online updater application. Now, what this is, I believe, is it's a bunch of patches for the official openSUSE packages, and you can certainly use that, and you'd probably use only that if you were running something like a server. And you didn't want lots of your packages all being changed, just the security packages. If you're running Tumbleweed, though, you're probably not going to be too worried about that anyway. And so you'll just do, well, you'll use Zipper or you'll use Yast here. And I'm just opening up Yast so you can see what it looks like. And let me make this full screen. So you can view all sorts of things here. You can view what they call patterns, and we saw this page when we were first installing. So if you wanted the GNOME desktop environment, you've got the key patterns there, the Enlightenment desktop, LXDE, LXQT. I wonder, I'm just going to do a search. If I, for instance, wanted to install, hey, Xmonad, is that going to be there? Yeah, it is. Okay, all good. What about, let me have a think. BSPWM, is that going to be there? Yeah, that's going to be there. Okay, so whatever you want to install, you do it from here. It looks a bit clunky, but what I quite like about it is if, for instance, you click on one, you do at least get a little description of exactly what it is, which is quite nice. And it's pretty straightforward, to be honest, once you get used to it. And now it's got a zipper as a back end. It's pretty fast as well. Never used to be quite as fast. So you have hardware information. With Yast, really it does a lot of the tasks, or it gives you a GUI for a lot of the tasks that in many other distros you just use the command line for. So if you feel more comfortable with a GUI, this may be for you. That's really quite nice. So you've got a tree with all the bits and pieces for all your devices. Okay, let's close that. Your keyboard layout, your printers. I don't know if the printer will be picked up by this, but let's have a look. So printer configurations. Let's click Add and see if it actually detects my network printer. As you know, I often try this in Debian-based distributions and Arch-based distributions, and some of them detect it, some of them don't. It depends what drivers they've got installed. So if it doesn't detect it straight away, it's not a big issue. I'm sure you could actually figure it out, but I just thought it would be quite nice to see if it's going to get it. And no, it's not finding anything. It's a bit of a shame. And again, it's sort of, I'm going to refresh the list again. It's these little things that make openSUSE more difficult for the new user. Just a shame that you've got to fiddle about with the Pacman repo and that you've not got printers configured out of the box. So your scanner, your sound, you can configure your bootloader, kernel settings, low-level system options, set your language, network settings. They have a partitioner here that includes things like RAID, and you have a service manager. It does use systemd, openSUSE, and it has its own GUI for managing your services, which is really quite nice. Set your host name, LDAP and Kerberos. Again, we're talking about sysadmin, mail server settings. You can set up as an NFS client, an NIS client, NTP configuration. You can see a lot of server type tools there. iSCSI initiator. Okay. And then security, you've got a firewall, configure sudo, user and group management, and interestingly enough here, install hypervisor and tools. Display the system log, systemd journal, etc., etc., or install a driver from a vendor-specific medium. So lots you can actually do in Yast, and certainly if you were going to deploy SUSE in a corporate environment, and of course we have SLES, the enterprise version of SUSE for that mainly, well, hey, makes life easy for administrators. By the way, just before we go, should we just log out and have a look and see if we can get into XFCE, which we seem to have. The welcome screen is launching, and actually it's a customized XFCE desktop as well. That's the whisker menu. Very nice. But for the time being, let's go and have a chat. Right, so that was openSUSE Tumbleweed. The thing about something like openSUSE, it will have a lot of its fans who just use it all the time and nothing else. And I can pretty much guarantee that somewhere in the comments there'll be a saying, oh, you missed this and you missed that. Yeah, guys, this is a first look. I can't possibly cover everything. I know one of the things that I didn't go into was snapshots. Because it uses btrfs as a default, snapshots are something that you can automatically do. I don't know much about that, if I'm honest, so I sort of swept past it. But what do I think of the distro? I think it's great. Tumbleweed, and perhaps because it's Tumbleweed, had a few paper cuts there. There was the issue that I wasn't getting the right click menu or the wallpaper when I first booted in. but a quick log out and log back in seemed to resolve that. It was a shame, really, that it wasn't picking up my printer, and I'm not sure what went on with adding the Pacman repo. I'm sure it was me. I've probably done something wrong, but anyway, it worked when I did it on the command line, and I think I may well install it to my SSD. Might be time to overwrite Void, which I'll be quite sorry about, actually, because I've really enjoyed using Void. But to perhaps spend a little bit more time in openSUSE to give it a fair run. So would I use it? Yeah, I think I would, actually. I'd use it because of its longevity. It's been around for such a long time, and it's built up a reputation. It's had a bit of a checkered history, as the company itself has been bought by different corporate entities. But I think it deserves probably a little bit more attention than it currently gets. So that's it for today, guys. Before I go, if I can just say, please join me on Library. And also, I would like to give special thanks to my Patreons, Corbinian, Aristotelis, Stormpix, Stephen, Mike, David, Entropy UK, Richard and Ty. We've got 9 Patreons now, so if you'd like to join, please do so. It would be much appreciated, and patrons are going to make this channel all it can be over the next year. Other than that, guys, you have a great weekend, and I'll see you in the next video.